Welcome to Kit Katastrophe. My name is Kit, and today we'll be taking a look at Transformers Studio Series Deluxe Class Ratchet. The repaint, of course. This figure came out in 2018 as part of Wave 3 of the Deluxe assortment, and represents Ratchet's appearance in the 2011 film Transformers Dark of the Moon. Being a straight repaint of his previous Wave 1 figure, Ratchet still turns into a Hummer H2, modified to become a search and rescue vehicle. And since this represents Ratchet's Dark of the Moon appearance, he sports the milky gray and neon green color scheme present in that film. These colors work for me a lot more, mostly because neither color really takes precedence over the other, which wasn't the case on the original, where the bright green absolutely dominated the robot mode. It feels more balanced. The Autobot symbol tampografs are still present on either door, albeit changed slightly. The E4 tampografs, along with the word Fire Department, are done up in an astonishingly crisp series of applications. I also kind of prefer this over the heartbeat strip of the previous deco. Also, this time he has painted rear windows. I'd rejoice if the paint that picked out the topside lights on the original wasn't missing on this release. As for structural problems, the front passenger side wheel just does not want to peg in place without some serious effort with careful pressure, meaning his wheels end up cockeyed in vehicle mode most of the time. This is most definitely due to the added layer of paint on the tab that connects it to the wheel assembly, so someday I'll have a look into scraping it off somehow. For what it's worth, the wheel has begun to cooperate the more I've messed with it. Ratchet differentiates himself from his predecessor by coming with an all-new accessory, the gun he was wont to be seen with on screen. And it's an unpainted hunk of black plastic. Seriously, there's nothing on here, no silver or green accents at all. Plus, the thing is completely hollow on the underside. After the beautifully painted and sculpted saw blade of the original, this just feels disappointing. Just like the saw blade, the gun can be placed on the rear tire in vehicle mode, or in a peg hole on either side. It doesn't look too great, but I always appreciate weapon storage. Being a simple repaint, Ratchet's transformation goes unchanged. That is to say, it is a slightly refined version of the Dark of the Moon Deluxe Class Ratchet's conversion scheme. The transformation still feels fine, with no major tolerance changes from his previous release. At least, not any detrimental ones. My copy of SS-16 Ratchet's hips are ever so slightly tighter than SS-04 Ratchet's. Also, the tabs on this figure's front bumper are not nearly as strong, allowing me to pull it down for robot mode as intended in the instructions. Well, it looks like the paint budget went into the vehicle mode. SS-16 Ratchet's color scheme is a fair deal worse than SS-04's, at least in terms of paint applications. The silver from the feet and shins are missing, replaced by blocks of base plastic color. Same for the extra headlights present on his shoulders. At least Ratchet's face gets a lot more love with that paintbrush. One thing to bring up, as viewer Lance Vienne pointed out to me while I was writing this script, is that the Kibble backpack kind of gives off the impression of coattails, which now makes me wish he came with a Crosshair-style coat, a la the medic from Team Fortress 2. Ratchet can wield his gun in this mode, but he only ever looks good doing so when it's in his right hand, as a strange piece of sculpted detail on the weapon's left side bangs into his left hand's fingers. As a left-handed shooter myself, this saddens me. Unfortunately, that same piece of errant sculpted detail also bangs into the plating when you try to arm mount it on either side, meaning the gun simply cannot hug any tighter. Ratchet's only other accessory is his Studio Series requisite display stand titled Battle of Chicago. Obviously, this represents the Battle of Chicago from the third act of Dark of the Moon. It looks really good, and I'm not quite sure if any other figure so far comes with it as well. Still a shame I don't use these for anything other than decor. I'm going to be doing something a little different as far as posability goes for this series. I've grouped every possible joint I could think of and grouped them based on my own personal priority. Out of all the joints I'd consider primary joints, Ratchet has 1 at the head, a simple swivel joint, ball-jointed shoulders with impeded forward and backward movement and slightly impeded outward movement, 2 hinges at the elbow which provide a really deep curl, ball-jointed hips with unimpeded forward and hardly impeded outward movement. He can't move his legs backward without untabbing his backpack, and he can almost do the splits. An extremely deep knee bend due to transformation. Out of all the joints I'd consider secondary joints, Ratchet has an unimpeded bicep swivel on a mushroom peg, a mostly impeded thigh swivel. You can't do much with it, but it can help some poses look more natural. Extremely expressive ball-jointed ankles connected to a hinge. This greatly improves his standing base in most poses. As for any joints I'd consider tertiary joints, Ratchet has what I'd describe as a reverse butterfly joint. It's simply due to the shape of the cup of his ball-jointed shoulders, but he can bring his shoulder line backwards, which can be extremely expressive. Overall, Ratchet's posing meets all of my basic criteria and most of my advanced criteria while throwing in a nice surprise. The biggest detriment to his posability is the lack of a waist swivel, as his construction could have totally fit one in, although untabbing the backpack would be necessary. Still, Ratchet features a lot of potential for expressive posing. I don't really prefer SS16 Ratchet over SS04, and neither do I prefer the opposite. Both of these figures have their own special qualities that make them worth the purchase, be it 04's weapon or 16's vehicle mode color scheme. It's impossible to tell which is categorically better, at least to my own tastes. I prefer to use the term side grade when referring to this particular figure. Choose whichever rubs you the right way. You can't go wrong. This has been Katastrophe. It's time to transform and roll out.